And our next guest now is Fintan Fagan, who's the CEO of St. Francis Hospice here in Blanchardstown and Raheny. Fintan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming along today. And of course, we have Palliative Care Week this week for the hospice movement, who've done such a great job of taking care of people who are suffering from a terminal illness, particularly those who are at home. And I'm sure it's a very difficult time for people who've got that kind of need. And of course, the teams that you have in the hospice movement go out to people and visit them in their homes and try to help them, ease them through that journey.
Yes, Charlie, this is Palliative Care Week, and it's been coordinated by the All-Ireland Institute of Hospice and Palliative Care to bring a greater awareness and a deeper understanding of palliative care across the island of Ireland. And this year, the campaign slogan is Enabling Living, and it's to highlight the positive impact of palliative care has on the quality of life of people living with a serious and progressive condition.
Yeah. And in terms of, when you said the island of Ireland, this goes right across up to the 6 counties.
Yeah, the All-Ireland Institute is a 32-county institute, and it is a combination of all of the hospice services across Ireland. And St. Francis Hospice Dublin, with our hospices in Raheny and Blanchardstown, are part of that All-Ireland Institute. Yeah. And we welcome the opportunity today to talk to your listeners about palliative care and to hopefully bring a better understanding of the benefits of palliative care.
Well, maybe just explain to the listeners for a moment what exactly is palliative care and who do you generally treat under that?
I suppose palliative care is, and also known as hospice care more commonly, is generally perceived as a treatment for those patients who have advanced cancer. And it involves symptom control and pain management and a general management of the condition and support of the family who are supporting the patient. But it's important to note that other patients who are living with advanced heart disease or lung disease, kidney failure, or other conditions like motor neuron disease could avail of palliative care.
Yeah, so you've got quite a wide variety of patients that can avail of the service.
Absolutely, and in many different settings. The St. Francis Hospice team, based in Raheny and Blanchardstown, provide services in the 2 hospices, but also provide home care to people in their homes. And our doctors work in Beaumont Hospital, in the Mater Hospital, and in Conley Hospital as well. So there's that connection between patients who are in those hospitals and can also avail of palliative care.
So you don't just go out to visit people in their homes, but you actually work within the health system itself.
Absolutely. And I suppose what we want to try and ensure is for the people of North Dublin is that they have access to as much as possible as high quality palliative care.
Okay. Now, I would have been aware, obviously, of the palliative care service, but how does, for example, if a member of your family is unfortunate enough, or you yourself have become seriously ill, what's the process for availing of palliative care? Are you nominated or do you have to ask for it?
Okay, so I suppose in terms of if you're an inpatient in a hospital, your consultant will make a referral to the palliative care consultant, and through that process you'll avail of palliative care. If you're in the community, your GP can make a referral to the palliative care services, the hospice services. Yeah. And for us, for example, last year we looked after 1,500 patients in North Dublin, of which 1,100 of those were cared for in the community. And the services provided to the patient and their family, and that's really important, that it's support for the carers and the loved ones of the patient as well.
And I think maybe perhaps that's a very important thing to understand, the care for the carers, because sometimes people tend to be overlooked, those who are looking after their loved ones, and it's great to know that the palliative care service is not just about pain management, though. Sure, it's more complete.
No, it's more complete. It's about it's the whole psychosocial, it's the whole family relationship, and it's the support, and it's about quality of life for the patient and family. And I suppose when the original vision for St. Francis Hospice Blanchardstown emerged from the voluntary board that St. Francis Hospice is run by, and local community leaders like Father Danjo O'Mahony and Father Eugene Kennedy. The vision was for a holistic service, and it accumulated in 2014 when we opened the 24-bedded inpatient unit at Blanchardstown, which is a wonderful facility and perhaps one of the best built health facilities in the country. And
that's a 7-day service as well. But some of the hospices can only, unfortunately, provide a 5-day service.
Yeah, I suppose across the country where you don't have an inpatient unit, there are home care services, and they can be restricted. But I suppose there's a move generally across the country to try and improve palliative care services to the standards that we have in the Blanchardstown region. But our ambition here is to ensure that patients get greater access to high quality palliative care. And in that effort, we have fantastic support from the community, and it mightn't be known that well, but we have 240 volunteers that work with us on a regular basis in the hospice.
That's a huge number.
Huge number, and they do a variety of roles, from being drivers, hairdressers, complementary therapy. And one very interesting support that a volunteer provides is life stories. So a patient can get an opportunity to have their life story recorded and be interviewed by a professional interview like yourself, and get an opportunity to sort of pass on their wisdom and talk about their life. And
leave a legacy behind.
Yes, absolutely.
So important, because it's like, you're walking in the sands of time, and when you pass that, the water washes over. People I think it's innate in most of us that we'd like to leave a little bit of us behind for others to celebrate your life or your time. And I think people have a lot of experiences that others can benefit from. So that life story service, I think, is particularly poignant and helpful.
And it does take great courage for patients to cross the threshold of the hospice. And, they have many fears and worries, but I can assure people that the kindness and the professionalism of our staff and volunteers soon abates those fears.
Well, I can understand that. I visited one of our older neighbours some years back in the hospice in Harold's Cross. I lived right beside it. But in all the years, thankfully, in one respect, I never had the occasion to visit. But when our good neighbour became ill, we went to visit her in the hospice there. And I was absolutely struck by the ambience of the units, the peace, the good-natured approach, and despite the seriousness of the individual's conditions, the patients there, everyone was in good form. People were constantly smiling. It just gave me a very strong, warm, good feeling about the whole setup.
Yeah. And what we do is we try to create a home away from home, and they're
very relaxed.
They're very relaxed environment. And our director of nursing, Sister Margaret Cashman, creates a fantastic team and a fantastic atmosphere in the hospice. And she talks about us having had weddings in the hospice, having had communions in the hospice.
I was reading that last night before I hit the sack, as they say, as a bit of prep work. And you tend to forget that these illnesses can strike almost at any age, at any stage of life.
Yes. Yeah.
So I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised to see that communions, weddings and so forth were part of the life of a person in the hospice.
Yeah, and I suppose having a hospice like Blanchardstown, that we have the space, the facilities to have those events. And I suppose the vision for the St. Francis Hospice Board, having had the experience of delivered the service in Raheny since 1989, when they got the opportunity to build a new hospice in Blanchardstown, they certainly built the best hospice they could possibly build.
State of the art, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And as we like to say sometimes, fit for purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a real ambition amongst the board and amongst the management in the hospice and the staff that we want to increase the access to hospice services for the people of North Dublin, and particularly people of Dublin 15. And with that in mind, recently we've increased the number of home care nurses by 6.
Wow. At a time when everyone else is cutting back in the health service.
and in fairness to the HSE, and at times I know they get difficult press, but they have prioritised palliative care of late, and they did give us the funding for an additional 6 nurses.
Well, I think if you've ever experienced one of those illnesses that applies, or palliative care people, teams go out and treat, some of them can be very nasty. And the difference that the palliative care team can make to that person's quality of life is simply amazing. Yeah. And I know so many people who have spoken so highly of the services from St. Francis. You talked about the 240 volunteers, and I know that you want to give them a special mention and word of thanks. But just to say that the community here in Dublin 15 were extremely supportive of the hospice movement here. The effort that went into acquiring and attracting St. Francis's to the area, the sustained fundraising that went into getting it off the ground, simply amazing, the amount of effort that people and generosity of the local community here and the business community as well.
Absolutely, and the figures for the hospice, the build of the hospice, are very interesting. It cost 24.5 million to build the hospice, and over 7 million of that was raised in the Dublin 15 area directly, which is incredible. And every year we need to raise 4 million to run the services. And that is down to community support. So that is down to the events that are run in the community, the support for our coffee morning, support for Sunflower Day, and we really appreciate that support from the community. Yeah. And our commitment to the community is to continue to deliver an excellent service, but also try and ensure that more patients get access to the service.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important. When I was growing up, the hospice movement, I suppose, was in its infancy. But having said that, the demand always exceeded the availability of resources. The hospice movement were always struggling to try and catch up with the demand on their services. And, that's why I'm delighted to hear that you've been given the extra nursing staff to help make the service more widely available. And obviously you're going to continue to try and make sure that you fully address the needs of the area.
Absolutely, and in the midst of that 4 million that we fundraise, it's support from the individuals in the community, support from the businesses as well in the community, and a particular support of our office is the Blanchardstown Shopping Centre, and people will see the fountain at the centre of the Blanchardstown Shopping Centre, which is dedicated to St. Francis Hospice, and we want to feel part of the community in Blanchardstown. It's a little easier in Raheny since we're actually just right beside the village. Sometimes in Blanchardstown it's a little bit more difficult because we're off the motorway and that. But having sort of loyal supporters in the Blanchardstown Shopping Centre and having that connection with all of the people is really appreciated.
And I think the community appreciate you, staffing and running the facility here in Blanchardstown. I know of a number of my neighbours who unfortunately succumbed to cancer over the years. But the one thing that gave solace to their families in their time was the fact that they had the services available of the hospice to make that journey easier, and the fact that the entire family were taken care of, not just the patient themselves, but those around them as well.
And Charlie, it's worth mentioning in terms of the staff, the range of staff that we have, from our nurses to our doctors to complementary therapists to physios to social work. So it's a very sort of professional team who are supported by the board and the management, but also supported by our education service. One of our mission is to educate about palliative care. And to provide the support to the staff so that they always have the highest professional standards, but also to educate staff in other areas. So we provide education services into the general hospitals, into nursing homes, and into the GP community as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's over 580,000 people in North Dublin, and we want to try and ensure that whatever circumstance they find themselves in with an advanced illness, that they can avail of palliative care.
Yeah, because obviously the difference between having and not having is such a wide gap there, gulf. It does affect one's quality of life, so it's vitally important that you get it as available or at the earliest possible opportunity.
Absolutely, and with that in mind, what we're able to do now is that if we get a referral from a GP for a patient who requires a home care service, is that in over 90% of the cases we can provide a first visit from a doctor to a patient within 7 days of that referral.
Well, that's amazing, and you see, I think that's why people are so keen to support the service that you offer. It gets right into the nub. It deals with the problem, as I say, early on, and if you're anxious about your relative or yourself, and what you're experiencing, it has to be of comfort to you to know that this service is available as soon almost as the need is identified.
Yes, and that's what we strive to do, and that's what the staff, who are very dedicated, very professional, strive to do. So they see it as their sole objective to support the patient and the families, and to get the service to them as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And I suppose there have been great advances in palliative care in the last couple of decades.
Yeah, I suppose generally in palliative care, if you look at 30 years ago, there was 2 consultants in the country who delivered palliative care. There are now nearly 40 consultants who deliver palliative care. So there has been advances. There's been new hospices developed across the country, and there are plans for further hospices to be developed. So, and in terms of the advances, I suppose, in relation to pain management and symptom control, and there continues to be advances. Our part of our team are involved in research as well. Mm-hmm. So that sort of research and education will hopefully bring further advances.
And in terms, you were saying that you actually go into hospitals, you help to educate GPs and nursing staff and nursing homes and so forth. Do you find an appetite for those communities, the stakeholders in the medical profession, to take on board the message of the palliative care movement?
I would say most definitely. I would say, I suppose there has been circumstances where patients would have I suppose, passed away in circumstances where they could have benefited palliative care. I think the general hospitals, I think the nursing homes, and particularly the GPs do see huge benefit of it, and do embrace our team and work very closely with our team. And we work very closely with the public health nurses as well. Yeah,
I have great admiration for the public health nurses. My family have had regular interaction with them on behalf of a member of my family. And I have to say that if you enter into the right spirit of it, work with them, you can make a tremendous difference to the patient, in terms of their quality of life.
And we, I suppose, locally, again, it's a very local service, and we, our primary contact within the HSE is a lady called Mary Walsh, who is very, very supportive of us and has a great understanding of the palliative care services. So we have very positive engagement with the HSE, and we work very closely with them, and we work to strive to work closely with the public health nurses and our colleagues in the general hospitals,
and also, by the sound of it, in the wider community as well.
Yeah.
And again, it's a referral service, but
yes,
and what obviously, if you are in that situation, you would obviously go to your GP first and talk to them about how things are with you.
Yeah, and generally, I saw somebody with an advanced illness, be it cancer or heart disease, has a team that are supporting them in the community. It's the GP as their primary care. In the hospital environment, they'll have a consultant who leads out in that as well. And it's obviously to speak to them in the first instance.
And would you be the person to initiate, or would the medical professional initiate the conversation?
It's the medical professionals. So when a patient is at home, the community, their primary Care is their GP, so it's the GP that would initiate the referral. When they're in the hospital environment, it's if it's in a case of cancer, it's their oncologist, or if it's a case of heart failure, it's their cardiologist, and so those professionals will work very closely with our doctors. So we have a doctor who shares sessions with Beaumont Hospital, so she works part-time in Beaumont and part-time with ourselves. The same with the Mater Public, and also with Connolly Hospital.
Okay, so there's a real interaction between the various levels here.
Absolutely.
And there has to be, I suppose, really.
And there has to be a proper referral and a consideration
absolutely.
Then, of all of the
And
symptoms.
if you're the patient or a relative of a patient, generally, we were just talking with an earlier contributor there about the reluctance of men in particular to speak up, tough it out. Is it a case that the medical profession would recognise that someone is in difficulty even though they're not prepared to say it?
I know, absolutely. And I think all the professionals are trained to understand where patients are coming. I wouldn't necessarily sort of say that men in particular might be reluctant. I think patients can be reluctant, and they will have sort of fears about it. But I suppose it's key for people to talk to their medical professional
to let them know how they feel,
and to let them know. Another aspect of our service is daycare. So we have a daycare service in Blanchardstown and in Raheny, where the volunteer drivers actually would bring somebody into the hospice, and it's a point where people can get sort of used to the idea of hospice as well, and they get medical care in terms of symptom control and social care as well, but also can avail of complementary therapy, which can include anything from getting your hair done, and that men can get it done as well.
I'll tell you, nothing wrong with that.
To getting.
And what about the nails?
To getting massage and all of that. So those type of services are there as well. And we have an outpatient service too, where people can come in and avail of physio
so
support.
It's really
and
very, very wide.
It is a comprehensive service. I suppose hospice care and palliative care, it's a subacute service really. So it's that difference between an acute hospital and
but it's almost like you've nearly every shoe size in the range, because you're developing so many different elements of it. You're looking for areas that might not be covered, and you try to cover it. That's the way it appears to me.
There are two new programs that we have developed in recent years. In partnership with the Mater Public Hospital is a heart failure program.
Right.
And that's essentially about sort of rehabilitation and to sort of help people cope with the symptoms of heart failure. And we're now about to sort of look at a breathlessness program, which is linked to lung disease.
That's COPD.
Like COPD and that,
stuff, chronic obstruction, pulmonary diseases.
Pulmonary disease,
I did my homework last night. But that's fascinating to hear that story, Fintan, because I think most of us have probably a broad brush understanding of what the hospice movement is about. And we only become more aware if either a member of our family or a close friend is involved with the movement through an illness and whatever. So I suppose, and maybe thankfully, that people don't experience it on a very regular basis is a good thing. But I think it's so important for a service like that to be available. It makes such a difference to the individual and their families to know that they're being cared for in a way that is trying to make that journey, passage through time, as easy as possible. And as you say, manage the pain, the anxieties that are associated with that particular condition.
And we encourage feedback from our directly from our patients and also from their families as well, because the service can always be improved. And we definitely encourage feedback there.
Well, I mean, you just look at the advancements that you've made there and the different areas that you try to provide your channels, that you try to provide your service through. And I think it's a huge compliment to the movement that you've been so innovative in the caring of your stakeholders and their families in particular as well. Because I think people maybe don't realise, well, yes, the families do go through an awful lot of anguish when the suffering is.
Yeah. And I suppose when they know that that St. Francis Hospice, and I suppose the success of St. Francis Hospice is based on the principle of voluntarism.
Yeah.
So from our voluntary board, which is led by Justice Peter Kelly, right through to the hundreds of volunteers that help us fundraise, to the volunteers that work directly with our highly qualified and professional staff. That team, that service couldn't be delivered without all those elements.
And I think just as a member of the community, I would just like, on behalf of the radio station, to thank all those volunteers out there and the 240 that are associated with the local hospice here. You're great. Keep up the great work that you're doing, and the hospice movement needs your ongoing help. And we as a community here in Dublin 15 greatly appreciate your presence here in the community. And I wish you well into the future on your movement, Fintan, and long may it continue to grow and prosper in terms of the very valuable service that it provides.